Hollow footfalls echoing through empty corridors. The primal reaction of flesh brushed by an unseen touch. Shadowy figures slipping between the moss-covered boles of ancient trees. Strange calls issuing from not quite human throats, piercing the stillness of the night. Unusual lights and objects streaming across darkened skies. Stolen minutes and a void filled with obscure and disturbing memories. These occurrences and more are called by many whispered names in many countries around a world we believe we know so well. All of these things share a common thread. I'm Charles Romans, and welcome to the pathways leading to the shadows of legend. One day each of us will close our eyes for the final time. Our hearts will slowly cease to beat, and our last breath will whisper through silent lips as we leave this existence behind. Yet is this truly the end? Do we simply cease to be as the last spark races from our brains along cooling neurons to its final destination in oblivion? Or does the part of us that is uniquely our own continue beyond the grave? Is there existence beyond the temporal? And if so, what mysteries might that existence hold? There are those who would have us believe that our lives end with our final tomorrow, that the physical world is both our beginning and ultimate end. There are also those who reject this explanation, instead contending that the physical world is simply one aspect of an existence which may stretch on through eternity. For now, we are left to wonder if the strange apparitions are a product of our feverish minds, or if ghosts do haunt the fringes of the material world. The ultimate truth may lie somewhere between, unknown to us until we each pass beyond that veil. And between our searching eyes and that veil lies a path that leads us to the shadows of legend. Today we're speaking with Jeffrey Duty. How are you this evening, Mr. Duty?
Well, I'm doing fine, sir. Glad to be here. How are you?
I'm doing well. I understand that you have had several paranormal experiences.
Yes, sir, that is correct. I've had more than a few, yes, sir, and I'd be more than happy to share some with you if you'd like.
Okay, well, if you wouldn't mind to do so, just kind of set the stage and give us a little bit of background of where this occurred and share your experience.
Okay, well, let's see. I'll keep it flippy here. Several years ago, I was an employee at a facility that was ran by the state, which had residents who were sent there by the court system, and it was a strict program somewhere between, basic training and a halfway house, so to speak. Very strict program, and basically I worked midnight shift there, okay? And I knew a lot of the gentlemen who worked there for years, even before I went there, because I'd worked with them on previous jobs. And the first night there I was working midnight shift, they said, one of them looked at me and said, and laughed and said, this place is haunted. And I laughed, of course, I thought he was joking. He said, it's worse when you leave the lights on. So I've turned all the lights off for you, And I spent approximately 18 months working midnight shift at that facility before we moved to a different location. And I wasn't the only one who witnessed any of these stories that I may tell you this evening as a background. How's that?
Okay. Now, during this shift, what was the typical, behavior pattern of the facility, your residents there?
Our residents went to bed, lights out at 10 p.m. Midnight shift started at 11 o'clock and ended at 7 a.m. It was such a strict program that our residents would not even dare to get out of bed without permission, because they would have been a violation of their contract agreement, because if they succeeded and survived the program, they qualified for probation and parole. So they were walking on eggshells. So whatever happened during the course of that midnight shift, of course, I was working by myself. I knew whatever was going on or anything that I would have heard or saw that the residents were involved.
How large was the facility? How many people were actually there?
It was a large 4-story building. Okay. It originally had been a tuberculosis hospital in the early 1930s and early 1940s. And after that, it stayed vacant for a while. Then the state judicial system came in and bought it and used it for residential facilities for people who had committed felonies and misdemeanors and so forth. And what you would do is you would come in and make sure all the doors were secured, and which was, even though it was the job of second shift to make sure that you did that, they did that, you did that also, just in case somebody had made a mistake. And once the facility was secured, you did some basic preliminary log paperwork, and then you did bed checks approximately every 15 to 25 minutes.
Now, what was the age range of these residents?
Anywhere from, say, 14 to 21.
So it was juveniles for the most part.
Yeah, that is correct. It was a juvenile Department of Justice correctional facility, yes, sir. And the first night I was there, I noticed that there were a few small noises coming from the floor above me, which would have been a kitchen dining hall area. And went upstairs with my flashlight and checked it out, but didn't see anything. But as the shifts progressively wore on, and this didn't happen every night, I would say an average of 2 to 3 nights a week, between 12:30, and usually didn't happen any later than 20 to 5, I noticed that. And you're probably interested in some of the occurrences, is that correct? Sorry.
No, that's quite all right. Yes, we had discussed a couple of things earlier, and if you wouldn't mind to share those, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Would you like to hear about the shadow?
Yes, please.
Okay, sure. That's a good one to start off with. So I come to work one night to relieve evening shift, and there was a gentleman sitting at the desk. And these occurrences, of course, everybody who worked evening shift or midnight shift usually experience the same things. And so we were able to discuss it with one another. And I came in, and the gentleman looked at me and said, "Tonight," I said, "How did it go?" And he said, "Well, tonight my shadow ran off and left me." And I said, "What?" He said, "My shadow ran off and left me." And I said, "Oh, okay, sure, no problem." Okay. So it went in one ear and out the other, and I began my shift. And it was about, I don't know, a couple of nights later, I'd say about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. I was walking up a stairwell. Now, this thing had a huge, winding, old-fashioned stairwell, okay, that those old buildings had. Very wide steps, large stairwell. And I learned in a hurry that when you come in to start your shift before second shift left, to turn all the lights on upstairs and downstairs and in the stairwell, because it made the activity less active for some odd reason. And so I'm walking up a first flight of stairwell, and I'm looking, and I see my shadow cast on the wall to the left of me. And I just happened to notice that for a fraction of a moment, since I've been told that previous story from the other gentleman who worked evening shift, that my shadow was not keeping strictly in step with me. Okay. And so I paused for a moment, and I looked at the wall. Of course, I saw my shadow just there. And I raised my left hand up and moved it to the left, raised it in the air, and the shadow did with me also. And I thought, And I took my right hand and raised it to the right, and the shadow did also, And then I raised my left hand up again to the left. And as I was doing that, I took my right hand and shook it. And then I noticed that the shadow couldn't keep up with it. And then all of a sudden, it shrank down to about 18 inches high and ran up the wall upstairs. And then I looked behind me, and I saw my real shadow cast at a 45-degree angle behind me.
So during all this, did you have any feeling of dread, any kind of imminent threat or anything like that? Or was it just such a strange occurrence?
Well, what happened? Well, there have been occurrences before that. And at first, it's a little rattling. But after being in that type of environment for so long, you kind of get desensitized to it. Okay, it's hard to explain. As a matter of fact, it got to the point to where I felt annoyed more than I did scared, because whatever it was out. It seemed like, from what we could gather, it was out for just attention. Okay, and it wasn't out to hurt anybody. Nobody ever got shoved down a stairwell, or no one ever got tripped or fallen or pushed or anything. It was just simply like it was seeking attention. And as a matter of fact, one of the gentlemen I worked with, we were discussing, he said that it seemed like there were like 2 or 3 personalities that worked there, and that seemed to be the case. It didn't seem to be one by itself. There seemed to be different personalities because they had personalities, and they had a gotcha kind of attitude, you know. Well, I know it's hard to explain, but that seemed to be the temperament of the entities that we were working with in this building, is that they had a gotcha attitude, because a lot of times they would try to act up, if how you want to use that phrase, when you weren't thinking about it. But to be honest with you, as time went on, the activity grew greater and greater. And to say it wasn't on your mind or you're working your shift would be a lie.
Now, were you ever able to determine where this energy came from?
Well, that's a good question, because you see, about an hour and a half to 2 hours before these activities would start up, okay, it sounded like the walls were popping and cracking. And the only way I can describe it, it just sounded like somebody was throwing pebbles at the walls, okay? The wood was popping and cracking is what it sounded like, you know. Which makes a different noise than if an old building is, say, shifting, you know. Okay. And if you heard that popping and cracking, then you knew within a few hours it was showtime.
I see. So you prepare for it.
Well, it's kind of like having a rat in the house. You never really get used to it. Okay.
Yeah.
But you learn to tolerate it, you know.
Right, because overall a rat isn't actually dangerous.
No, not unless you corner it, I guess, you know. And then, but there were other cases to where I was working with other people and saw certain things. One night, me and the evening supervisor was overlapping shifts. I got there early, and we were sitting downstairs, and there used to be a restroom in the next floor above us, and we heard someone inaudibly talking in the restroom upstairs. Okay. Well, me and him both knew that all the young men were in bed. So I looked at him and I said, "You want to go up and investigate?" And he looked at me and said, "Well, okay." So we walked upstairs and we got to the door, and we heard, Charlie, what sounded like inaudible mumbling, but in a foreign language. Okay.
Interesting.
It sounded like a foreign language. I want to say it sounded kind of like Dutch or Flemish, but I know that wasn't it. It was just a polyglot of something. And it was, you could hear it quite audibly when we were standing outside the restroom door, and the restroom door was closed. And I looked at my coworker and I said, "Do you want to open up the door?" And he looked at me and said, "No." And I said, "Okay." So we both went back downstairs. Even though I believe deep in my heart, had we opened up the door, we wouldn't have saw it. You know? Right.
You think maybe it satisfies itself that it got your attention, and then that was the end of it.
Right, because for some odd strange reason, that restroom upstairs for a while became quite an activity. You'd hear the toilet flushing from time to time at night. We had a window that it was an old-fashioned wooden window that we kept up in the restroom upstairs to air the room out, because it was such an old building. And it took quite a bit of force to push that old-fashioned wooden window down, because you know how those swell. And some nights you'd hear that window slam down. And finally, one night it got slammed down so hard the window pane broke in it, you know.
And that's not typically something would happen as a result of a house settling or something.
Oh, no. It took some force to get that wooden window pushed down so hard that one of the panes would break. I mean, you'd have to really, a grown man would have to really give it a good go to get the window pane to break, you know. And then one night I was working downstairs, and we kept food up on the third floor, and everybody was welcome to eat that worked there. So I thought, well, I'm going to go upstairs and make a sandwich. So I went up there with my flashlight. Of course, by then we'd all learned to keep the lights on. And some nights it didn't make any difference anyway. So the lights were off in this room next adjacent to the kitchen. And I'm getting my loaf of bread, and I start to walk into the refrigerator area, and I look to my left, and about 12 to 18 inches off the floor, I saw a white swirling thing, about 12 to 18 inches off the floor. Okay. And I politely turned around and just walked back downstairs, and didn't go back upstairs till morning.
Now, was this like a spherical shaped, or was it like a cloud, or?
I would describe it as circular in nature, like a cloud swirl, except you could actually see it swirling. It was kind of whitish. And like I said, it was about 12 to 18 inches off the ground. I told my coworker this, and who was very much experienced in these matters. He said, well, you probably walked in when something was trying to get you ready to manifest.
That's a possibility. It sounds plausible. And did you feel threatened there at all when that was happening?
Threatened? No. Taken aback? Yes.
Well, it's not something you see in normal course of the day or night, though, so that's understandable.
No, and that was the only time I ever saw that particular instance. But it's interesting that I should tell you about the manifestation it was trying to make. Would you like to hear the story about the young man who walked down the stairwell?
Yes, please do.
Okay. All right. Okay. I was sitting downstairs. We're next to my office. We had lots of rooms in this place. There was a sofa, and from the sofa you could see the stairwell from a great distance. And I was sitting there, and I wasn't the only gentleman who saw this. And I heard a door open and close upstairs. And I thought, okay, this is going to be good. And I'm sitting there, and I see a shadow on the wall from the stairwell, because this thing casts a shadow. And it started slowly walking down the stairwell. And it was a young man who did not belong in our group home. And he had his head face down toward the floor like he was in deep thought. And he slowly walked down the stairwell, and he was wearing a group home uniform that had not been used since the 80s. And he walks down the stairwell, and I'm not scared, but I'm dumbfounded, okay? Because the majority of experiences you had there were auditory. A few were visual, and this is one of the few visual ones I got. And this looked just as real as me and you. Mm-hmm. Yes. When it came down to the bottom stairwell, turned left, and then you had another floor you could go down. And just before it went to take a turn to the left, like it was going down to the basement area, it just disappeared. And then a coworker of mine saw it a few days later, and he described the same thing, but we never described what the young man looked like. Okay, so we kept an archive of pictures of every youth that came into our group home from day one that went all the way back to the 70s. Okay, so I had nothing else to do on midnight shift because it's generally quiet. So I spent like a week going through all these pictures, and excuse me. And I finally found a picture of the young man that I saw that was walking down the stairwell. And that's the reason why and also found out that he had been a resident there in the 1980s. Now, the years have passed so long that I have long since forgot exactly what year it was, but it's in the 80s. So I simply took that picture out of the archive. It had no name on it, no identification. It was just a picture of a young man. And I threw it in my coworker's box that morning when I left. Came back a couple of days later for my days off. Found the picture back in my box with a check mark on it because he was confirming to me that that was the young man he saw.
So there's no way that young man could have physically been there.
Oh, no. We're talking about an entity that if it actually was the young man, but it looked, it was him in the picture. He hadn't been there since the 1980s, and this was back in around 2004.
Now, was that, you said that there were a couple of physical sightings. Would you care to share some information on one of the other ones? Okay, well, let's see. Let's see what else. I can tell you ones I've never told you before. One night I was sitting in my office doing some paperwork. And from out my office, there was a wall across the hallway. And I'm sitting there, and like I said, these things always happen between like 12:30 and no later than 12:05. And I'm looking, and I look to the left, and I see a golf ball-shaped, bright silver-shaped ball, okay, that was bouncing irregularly off the side of the wall, up and down, okay, slowly. And it had a red tail behind it in the same way a sparkler would have a red tail if you waved it back and forth. Okay.
And it went up and down. And like I said, it was the size of a golf ball. And it headed toward the other room. And I didn't leave the office that night after that. Then let's see what else was going on there. But my very, very first experience with it was in one room. We had a television room, and I was sitting there late at night, of course, watching television. And I'm sitting there on the sofa in the dark with the TV on. And it sounded like someone had put a jar over my left ear and was talking through the jar. Okay. And it was like, I've got you now. That was my first experience. You know, it said, I've got you now. But it sounded like it was talking through a jar in my left ear. That's the only way I can explain it. Okay.
That would be a disturbing occurrence.
Now, that was a disturbing occurrence because before that, I had not been I was a skeptic before that. Okay. And that was my very first occurrence. And from there, like I said, it led to other paranormal experiences in that building. Okay. But I wasn't the only person that happened to. Every new employee that came in there that worked midnight shift eventually had the same experience, like it was textbook or something.
Sort of like whatever was there was initiating each new employee along that lines.
If you want to look at it that way, you say you can, because it wanted its presence known for some odd reason. And but there were some strange things about it, though, that made me wonder. Like, for instance, we kept these archives in the corner of one room. And one night I was working, and I was sitting on the opposite end of the room, and I heard somebody from the corner of that room where the archives were call out a name. It said, Dennis? Like, as in a question. The tone is in a question, right? Okay. And I'm sitting there thinking, my name's not Dennis. So whatever you are, you know I'm here, but you don't know
who you are.
Exactly who I am. Right. It knew I was one of the employees. Okay. But it was not able to recognize who I was. Now, I don't understand that one either. Okay.
Yeah, that's sort of unique.
Yeah, but that happened to other people. But we did have a gentleman there who did have that name.
Okay.
And now he was scared to death of it, so maybe it messed with him more. I don't know.
That could be possible, yes, because it got a better reaction from him, I would think.
Right. And as we started discussing the occurrences that were happening in this building, and maybe it was coincidence, I don't know, but as we discussed our experiences more with each other, because at first most people kept these experiences to themselves, for understandable reasons, it became more active after we started discussing it more openly.
And did it ever get beyond bearable levels?
Well, it all depends what you call tolerable. It loved to play with the kitchen cabinets upstairs. Okay. Some nights you would hear the kitchen cabinets open and close, and hear the glasses in the cabinets dingle together, Some guys reported before an occurrence happened that the hair on the back of their head would stand up. Okay. Now, that never happened to me, but it happened to a lot of other guys. And the young man always had to ask for permission to get out of bed at any time after lights out to use the restroom. And at first, it was like you would hear, permission to use the restroom, sir? And then you'd say, go ahead. And then you'd hear nobody get up out of bed. Now, we did bed checks. I'm sure you'd like to hear about that one, right?
Yes, I think the listeners would like to hear about that one.
Yeah, okay. This is a goodie. This deserves like a trophy here. Okay. So at that time, we had 11 residents. We maxed out at 12. And we had like 4 rooms, and all the young men were divided up into bunk beds in the different rooms. So you'd go through with your flashlight, start counting bodies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, until finally you got to 11. Well, a lot of the guys then were starting to have problems with their bed counts because they go through with the bed count, and at the end they realized they came up with the wrong number. Okay, they would come up with one too many. So they would have to go through and do their bed count again, and then they would come up with the right number. All right. So a night passed, and I did my bed count after listening to the other gentleman talk, and I noticed that I came up with one too many. So I came through again, I did my bed count, and then everything came up okay. And I thought about that for a while. I thought, okay, the next time this happens, I'm going to do things a little bit differently. So I went through one night, and it had been like I said, sometimes it happened one night a week, twice a week, sometimes maybe 3 days or past for things like this happen. Some nights were actually very quiet there. And then I was doing my bed count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But I had noticed before I started my shift, I took a look to make sure where every resident was at in their bed and which beds were empty before I started my shift. Okay, I need to back up on that a little bit to get it and keep instead of getting ahead of myself. And then I thought, okay, tonight I'm going to be ready when it happens because I know which beds are empty. Okay. So I'm going through and I'm doing my bed count. I don't know what time it was. I'm sure it's late. And I'm going into this next room and I noticed that I've got one too many people in this room in bed. And I look over this one bunk that was empty earlier where my shift started. And I look and I see something laying in bed, but the covers laying over it. But I see 2 feet sticking out of the bed, out of the bed sheet at the bottom. Okay. And I thought, oh, I've got you now. And as soon as I started to take a couple of steps forward into that bedroom, Charlie, the feet, which were vertical, like feet are when you're laying on your back, went to a flat horizontal, flipped back up underneath the blanket, and I saw what was underneath the blanket just like it melted underneath the blanket.
So now at that point, after this happened, it was just essentially an empty bed, correct?
Oh, yeah. It became instantly empty. It was like whatever was under it literally melted. I saw the form of a body underneath the blanket. And like I said, I saw the feet, which went flat down horizontal, which is not physically possible for a human. Slip back underneath the sheets, okay, which is not also physically possible. And then I saw the entire form underneath the blanket just literally melt, like there was nothing there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And then after that, I never had a problem with a bed count.
I see. Now, what do you have any theories on what that might have been?
Well, being a student of psychology with a minor in theology, then you have to understand that I reached a certain point to like, well, let's try to figure out whether or not these things, this entity or entities that I'm dealing with and the rest of us are dealing with, have cognitive abilities. Okay. And I discovered upon observation, because observation was as good as it gets, that some of these occurrences seem to have cognitive abilities as far as the ability to make a decision. Okay. And these were very clever, more intelligent than the average human in their cognitive abilities. Okay. And one night, I was sitting at my desk, and one night it started playing with the doorknob because they had lots of doors in the place. They'd take the doorknob and turn it left. And of course, the doorknob had a spring on it. And then let go of the doorknob, and you hear the doorknob swing back to the right. Okay. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, it wants me to get up and walk in there to see what's going on. Okay. So I refused to get up and give it any attention. So I thought, let's see if it has any cognitive abilities. Well, it seemed to get aggravated, so it started playing with the doorknob faster and harder to get me to get up and go in there and look. I refused to do it. I refused to yield to its whims, and it finally stopped, and that never happened again. Now we had a phone upstairs that some of the guys in the beginning, until things got worse, would go upstairs and use the telephone at night and call their friends and buddies and what have you. They knew we all had keys to every door. And we opened up the door and we left the keys in the lock of the knob. That way we wouldn't lose the keys. And you'd be there talking on the phone after about 3 or 4 minutes, and you would notice that the keys were still dangling left to right, back on the doorknob. Okay. Well, you'd think the keys would stop after about 30 or 40 seconds, when you let go of the keys. But no, after like 2 or 3 minutes, you'd look and notice that the keys were still swinging left and right.
Well, now, they were swinging back and forth enough to make noise, or just kind of swaying back and forth a little?
They were just swaying back and forth on their own impetus, it seemed, even though we knew something was swinging the keys. But, and I both know it doesn't take 3 or 4 minutes for a key swing, set of keys in a doorknob to stop swinging, And but it just got to the point, like I said, the more we talked about it, the more the activity heightened, okay? And which we thought that had something to do with it, okay? Like it was feeding off our interest or energy or something, okay? And it like I said, it heightened to the point to where you'd come to work, and before eating shift left, you'd go upstairs, you'd grab the entire coffee pot, and you'd bring it back downstairs with you so you wouldn't have to go back upstairs to get coffee. Got so we completely avoided the upstairs and ignored everything that happened, all the noises you heard upstairs. You would hear moans and groans from time to time. There was the famous, what we call the one-way conversation. The stairwell, like I said, was large, and it carried a pretty good echo to it, And we called it the one-way conversation. And some nights, and this would only happen for maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds, it was like somebody was talking to someone else in that stairwell. But it would only last maybe 10, 15 seconds, then it would stop. But it was a regular occurrence.
Did you ever make out any of the words or anything that were said?
No, the problem was it seemed so, it was like the words were blurred, like they were inaudible. Then it was the night, then we had a downstairs, of course, we had to do bed checks on that some of us were kind of skittish about doing. And some of the guys got so they wouldn't go down there. And we also kept a dog at the group home at that time. And that dog would go everywhere in the group home except for downstairs. That dog would refuse to go downstairs, It would not go downstairs, but it would go anyplace else. And some nights you could hear it upstairs like it was chasing something upstairs in a circle, because we had wooden floors,
Oh, yeah, definitely. Sound echoes.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, and then, of course, you could hear somebody walking across the wooden floors, okay, on you occasionally. But anyway, downstairs, one night I was doing a bed check, and I walked through something. And the only way I would describe it was it made the same sound that if you were underwater and trying to listen to noise. Okay. And when I walked out of it and walked back upstairs, I was so cold, my skin was cold, that it took like 5 or 10 minutes to get that cold off of me.
Well, people regularly report that encounters with spirits adjust the temperature, affect the temperature. People feel it getting much colder, for instance.
Oh, do they? Okay, I didn't know. Now we discovered that one of the entities did have that actual sense of humor. It was one summer. One of the boys had a portable fan next to their bed on a table. And I went downstairs, and I wasn't the only one that experienced it. And as I'm walking downstairs, I'm starting to do a bed check in that room, I hear, like somebody's blowing through a fan, like kind of kids used to do. And I looked over, and the kid's in bed asleep. And I look over, and there's the fan blowing, but I'm still hearing into the fan. I promptly turned around, walked back upstairs, and then went downstairs the rest of the night.
Now, of course, there were people sleeping in these areas. Did any of your residents ever report to you feeling scared or afraid for their lives?
Oh, yes. Yes. That we had a spell where I had one of the residents come to me, and he said, Mr. Duty, I got a question. I said, what's that? They said, why are you standing just outside our doorway staring into our room. I said, do what? He said, yeah. He said, we noticed that you're standing outside our doorway, staring into our room. And I said, well, young man, I said, I apologize, but I stay at my desk until I do bed checks. I don't stand there and stare into your room, you know. I said, they said, oh, no, it's got to be you. You're the only one here. I said, does it look like me? They said, no, we really can't see the face, but we see a person standing there, so it has to be you. They're staring in on us. I said, what's it doing? They said, it just stands there and stares into the room. And I said, for how long of a time? They said, sometimes for 15, 20 minutes. Because some of our youth did have wristwatches. And I said, okay. I said, well, listen, it is not me. But the next time that happens, I said, you call out for me and I'll come running. I said, will you do that for me? And he said, yeah. So a few days went past and one of them hollered for me. And I came running. I said, hey, what's up? And they said, I saw it standing outside my bedroom door again. So one of those entities or whatever it was not necessarily going into the youth's rooms, but they were standing outside the doorway because we didn't have doors on the where the door is supposed to be into the rooms. It was an open bay area, you know. Doors were never closed on those rooms. So, but you know, shortly after that, it stopped. But that occurred several times before it finally. It was like after it realized that its little game was over on that, it would try something new.
So anything new to get your attention.
That is correct. That is correct. Now, I will tell a good one on myself. It was summertime. And I was sitting in the TV room with the lights on, and it might have been 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And I leaned back on that nice, comfortable couch, my head leaning back on top. And, well, sir, I fell asleep. So
it happens, yes.
Yeah, I don't work there anymore. It's okay. So anyway, so if I wake up and I'm staring at the ceiling as I wake up, and I'm seeing half a person through the ceiling, and I'm looking at the back of their head and the back of their back. Okay. And I thought, what? You know? And I look up and look at that, and I immediately walk out of the room. Okay. And then I come back a couple of minutes later and it's gone. But I woke up and I saw someone like they were laying in a prone position, except I could see their body halfway through the ceiling of the room. And I don't know who it was. It was somebody tall and skinny, but they looked just as real as flesh and blood as me and you know. We had a television there. It was one of the first big screens. It was a big 45-inch TV. Remember those old first big screens, about how big and bulky they were?
Yes, definitely.
Well, anyway, we used to watch TV on it sometimes at night. And you'd have the TV on a certain channel, and you'd walk back in your office to start doing your log. And you're doing your log, and all of a sudden you would stop and listen, and the TV had changed channels.
And that's with no one there to have changed the channel.
Oh, no. No one would have got up to, well, I had the remote anyway, you know. And they could not have if you'd have got out of bed and got caught, you'd have been shipped off to a different facility and your any chances of probation or parole have been shot. So, you know. So anyway, it would change channels on you. Oh, and then sometimes it would change volume too, and you'd have to go in there and just turn the TV off, okay, or unplug it. Because there was a couple of times where it turned the volume up sky high on the TV, okay.
Now, could this have been a malfunction in the TV?
Well, theoretically, yes. What is the likelihood of that? Low, but I cannot discount the scientific possibility of a malfunction in the TV. But one of our coworkers found a snow channel. The channel was nothing on it. And I come in one night, and I forgot what channel it was. It was some obtuse channel number. He said, you need to turn on channel such and such tonight and watch it for a little bit. I said, well, there's nothing on that channel. He said, oh, yeah, there is. so I said, okay. So one night I got bored. You know how people are curious. And so I turned on that channel. And I'm sitting there staring at it for 2 or 3 minutes. I'm thinking, well, hell, I don't see anything. And all of a sudden, I could make out the figure through the snow, I couldn't make out details, but the figure of a person moving its head and its hands like it was trying to get my attention through the snow on the television screen, but there was no channel there.
How long did this last?
Oh, Lord, that could last for several minutes until you got creeped out and turned off the TV. Okay. And some of us got so that we came to work, we just unplugged the TV. Because it was just one of the games to play. And before we packed up and left, we started packing up because we were moving to a different facility. And it took us about a month to really slowly get things packed up. It acted like it was really unhappy to the fact that we were leaving because the building was going to be empty after we left. And it started making slapping sounds on the wall to get your attention. Like somebody was taking their hand and slapping the wall.
I'd say that would be quite unsettling.
And it was, like I said, you never got used to it. And, but at the same time, to a certain degree, you kind of got hardened to it after a while.
As you say, you can get desensitized to a certain amount.
You do. And what we learned was you're more afraid of what you can't see than what you can see. And I think it's just human nature, because if you can hear a noise that's creepy or unexplainable, it will put the edge on you a little bit, because you don't feel like you have any control over something that you can't see. But on those times where we did have visual occurrences, you just simply felt dumbfounded, because I guess the mind instinctively thinks, well, if I can see it, I have a sense of control, which is a false illusion.
Well, now, you had said earlier that you began as a skeptic after experience.
Absolutely. A skeptic. When he told me the place was haunted, I laughed.
Well, after all these occurrences, how would you explain these? What's your take on this, as it were?
Oh, wow. Okay, because there was a variety of different occurrences. Some occurrences seemed like a recording being played over a certain sound. We had a boiler room downstairs. And every once in a great while, and it didn't matter if it was nighttime or day, you would hear this blood-curdling scream coming from the boiler room that sounded like a female voice screaming, blood-curdling. And it would last for like 2 or 4 seconds and stop in mid-scream. Okay. So to us, it seemed like some kind of a recording effect, because it was the same sound over and over with the same, like someone just rudely cut off the recording in the mid-scream. Okay. And then there were some cases to where we felt like that some of these entities had cognitive abilities, the ability to reason and so forth. Like they'd premeditatedly thought about their act before they did it so they could get the edge on you. Now, my background in theology, this is my personal belief that I can't back up or prove. I seem to think that there were some demonic entities there. Was my opinion. Okay. You hear a lot of theories on what you're seeing as simply a playback of a memory, or or something that happened that left an imprint in the building, or you hear theories that there are spirits there. But my beliefs go more theological, so I actually believe that a certain amount of it was demonic activity. That's just my opinion.
Do you think at any point there were what people considered, and I know this is going to sound strange, but a normal ghost, as in the spirit of a deceased human? Or do you think it was all of the demonic nature? I
think most of it was demonic based, and so did the others, because in all the times that these occurrences happened, okay, in all the times I observed that there was cognitive abilities being used by these entities. There was no attempt whatsoever to communicate.
So essentially, based on what you'd stated earlier, they were just kind of showing off.
If you want to call it that, you can, or just playing head games, okay? Because I reasoned that, number one, if it were an actual human spirit that had cognitive abilities,
Yes.
and was able to make noises and close and open doors and appear in different places, I would think it would only be human nature to try to communicate with the living, wouldn't you?
I would agree with that. Yes.
Okay, but these made no attempt whatsoever to make an active, coherent communication with you. They wanted to let you know that they were there. They wanted to let you know that they were active when they wanted to be. They wanted to let you know that they could mess with you. They had decision making abilities, but they made no attempt to communicate with you in any manner whatsoever, sir.
Of course, the obvious question at this point is, did these entities follow you to the new location?
Well, we moved to the new group home, and everybody was kind of like on pins and needles, hoping that nothing followed us there. And do you know, once we got there, you could hear a pin drop in that place. It was quiet.
So whatever was in the building, you left it behind.
That is correct, sir. Yeah, whatever was there in that building. And then we had another facility next to it, which, ironically, because of law, I can't tell you which facility it was because it's a certain type of facility.
I understand.
But I spoke to the woman, one of the women who worked over there one night via telephone, and because she had a question about somebody sneaking around the property, they had to call police before. But anyway, and I asked her, I said, "Hey," I said, "I'm going to be up front with you in blunt here." I said, "This is going to sound crazy, but our place is like haunted. Do you all have the same problems? Because this building was only like 20 yards from us to the right." She said, "Oh, yeah." She said, "We have a rocking chair upstairs. And if you move that rocking chair, you'll get noises all night in that room. So we have to keep that rocking chair in the same place." So, and I spoke to other people because it was a state compound. So you had a variety of different agencies that worked in these different buildings. And I had an opportunity to talk to these different people from time to time that worked in these different agencies. And ironically, that whole area that had once been a TB hospital facility, every building had something in it.
Well, in places where there was a lot of tragedy, a lot of sickness, things of that nature, typically generate.
Right. That was another theory we had, too, that perhaps these things are attracted to emotional imprints left behind by people, perhaps, that we can't see.
That's a possibility.
Understand?
That's been postulated before.
Okay. So, but no, I could drone on for hours, sir, about stories if you wanted to hear them. Do we have time for one more?
Please, go ahead.
Okay. I'll entertain you with one more. I don't want to take up too much of your time because I don't know how long these things last. But anyway, it's been a privilege to be here this evening.
Thank you.
Once a year, we would take the young men, because we lived on a facility that was 11 acres. Excuse me. So once a year, we're going to take the young men up behind the facility on top of the hilltop to camp for 3 days. And we did that every year in the summertime. It was always in July. And, of course, I was working midnight shift. And it's about 1 o'clock in the morning. I will never forget this as long as I live because it's so vivid. And next to our camping spot was an adjoining property that had been grown over and had a barbed wire fence next to it. It was a very thick wooded area. And about 1 o'clock in the morning, because I know it was 1 o'clock in the morning because I looked at my watch. Matter of fact, it was almost 1:15. I started hearing what I heard at a very close distance in the woods next to me, what sounded like several young children laughing and playing and running and dancing through the woods. Okay. I mean, they're laughing and giggling. It sounds like they're chasing each other. Young children. And I'm sitting there thinking, wow, who would let their kids play in the woods at 1:15 in the morning? And then the sounds of laughter and giggling of these kids kept getting closer and closer and closer. Then finally they got so close, and then it just suddenly just stopped. Just stopped. And I thought, that was strange. Well, a couple of evenings later, I'm talking to my friend / employee that I have known for 30 years. Pretty straight guy who had worked a midnight shift. And I won't say his name. I'll just make one up. I said, "Hey, Mike." And I described what I heard. And I said, I found it so strange that somebody would let their kids play out in the woods at 1:15 in the morning. He said, "Jeff, I heard it too. Those weren't kids." And that was the type of craziness we had to put up with until we moved to this
This plays right back into your thought that this was caused by demonic entities.
Oh, I believe that so heartily because the only thing I can figure out was, since that building had been used from the early 1930s through at least 1949, 1950, that there had been so much misery and suffering going on there that evidently it became an attractant to these things. Is the only thing I can figure out. Of course, we look back. Me and a gentleman was looking back on it, and we said we should have kept a log of everything that happened. And you know what's strange too? At the time, not one of us, and you would think this would have been common sense, but not one of us took a recording device or a camera with us to work. Now that is the truth. Not one of us even thought of that. Now you would think somebody would have thought of that, but not one of us thought of that. But to us, it was coming to work and having to put up with that. It was basically what it came down to. No one was thinking about doing research or parapsychology or anything like that.
This is Charles Romans, and on behalf of myself and our guests, thank you for joining us on this walk through the shadows of legend. If you like what you heard, please follow us and visit our website at shadowsoflegend.com and support our Patreon page to help keep the content flowing. And if you would like to be a guest and share your own brush with a stranger paranormal, don't hesitate to email us and include a contact number. The strange and surreal, the normal and the paranormal are all aspects of the world in which we live. As you reflect upon the stories we have shared, keep in mind that the people sharing these stories are actual, real people just like us. Were the stories shared compelling enough to be given credibility, or should they be relegated to the deeper part of the shadows? But when determining this, it might be a good idea to keep an open mind, because when we look around, we might discover that our own world is less brightly lit than we once thought. Until next time, I'll be waiting for you in the shadows of